Hello everyone, welcome back. How's your journey in this course till now? I hope you are enjoying it, and also we hope that you're practicing everything at home to polish your understanding. Do you remember in the beginning of the course we mentioned that this course is practice driven? More you will practice, more refinement you will see in terms of your understanding about the fundamentals as well as their uses in your design work. Till now, we have covered line and shape and looked into its application and how it has been used in design composition. And we also discuss a lot of things related with meaning making and its uses. Now, in this video, we will start with understanding form, which is the third element. And I'm sure if you will pay attention to our discussion in this video, you will be able to understand the role of form as a fundamental element of design, along with understanding of its significance, how it differs from shape, and its practical applications in everyday visual communication. If you remember, we saw lines and discussed that how lines connects and make shapes, right? So when more than two lines are coming together, they create an enclosed area which is referred as shape. Now when you are bringing these shapes together, it will result into form. To define this in graphic design, form refers to the three-dimensional quality of an object or design. It distinguishes shapes that are flat, two-dimensional from those that appears to have depth, volume, or a three-dimensional presence. For example, if I look at this book, it has many planes, and because of that, we see this as a three-dimensional object. Form can be physical, like the book we saw, or like a sculpture, building, or anything which is there in physical setup. Or it can be implied through the use of light, shadow, perspective, and texture in two-dimensional space. So when we are visualizing form in two-dimensional space, for example on a paper sheet, this illusion of 3D can be created using many ways. Along with these three, which is visible on your screen, one is adding plane structures, second is by overlapping shapes, the way we saw overlapping lines as well, and shading technique. Adding several sides or plane to a figure at once result in a form by giving the figure depth and three-dimensional appearance. So when you bring these planes together, there is an illusion which gets created because of the orientation of these shapes. And in graphic design, this transformation occurs when flat two-dimensional shapes comes together, combined or manipulated to simulate the various surfaces or planes of an object. And these things happen in a space. For example, a square on its own is a flat two-dimensional shape, right? Do you agree with this? We discussed this in our previous lecture. However, when you add another side, the square transforms into a cube. The additional side gives the figure an appearance of depth, suggesting that it occupies space rather than just laying on flat surface. So, based on similar assumptions, this is an interesting work done by famous US based artist Miriam Sapiro. She has used the concept of adding different planes to create an illusion of 3D form. And for this, she has used computer. And the use of computer allows her to see space in a very new way. It also facilitated a lot of experimentation and uh, to help out to create complex form and structure. If you look at her other works, her other works are even more promising in color, reflecting all three elements which we have learned till now, that is line, shape, and form. Do you notice the striking line that are getting created when two colors are touching each other, whether it is red and yellow, green and red, blue and purple, light purple, or green and yellow. So wherever these colors are touching their boundaries, there is a straight line, a very prominent line is getting created. This we already discussed when we were discussing about the line. So by showing multiple sides of an object at once, for example front, top and side views, the design creates an illusion of depth as visible on the screen. Now this is an image taken by keeping wooden blocks in different orientation. So if you look at this, you will find that there are multiple sides, and because of those sides you see this as a three-dimensional object. So techniques such as isometric projections or perspective drawing allows for this kind of illusion. Most of the time by positioning the planes at an angles that mimic how the eye perceive objects in our real world. So let us look into isometric grid. Isometric grid allows designer to create three-dimensional object on a two-dimensional surface, giving the sense of depth and perspective without using traditional vanishing points. When we say traditional vanishing point, that means it is related with our natural seeing capabilities. For example, when we look at an object in natural setup, the object is upfront close to us, it appears bigger, and when it resides or goes away, its size changes accordingly, which is not the case what happens in isometric grid. So let us see some examples and characteristic features in isometric grids. If you look at isometric grids, it helps create three-dimensional shapes like cube, buildings, or complex objects that appear equally proportioned from all angles, because there is no distortion or change in size is happening with distance. The grid ensures precise alignment of lines and angles, making it useful for technical illustrations, infographics, architectural drawing, and product design. It is widely used in video games, especially for pixel art. Technical illustrations and logo designs are also some of the avenues where it has been used extensively, offering a clean and geometric aesthetic. Isometric grid also helps in terms of simplifying the process of visualizing 3D object, as the consistent angle and spacing make it easier to design complex structure without complex calculations. For example, if you look at this screen, This is a complex structure created by one of BDS students. And though it looks very difficult, if you are using isometric grid, it is quite easy to create this. Now let us look at overlapping. Overlapping is another way to create illusion of depth and value. And this kind of illusion can be created with flat shapes as well. For example, if you look at this famous painting by Pablo Picasso, the flat overlapping shapes gives an illusion of three-dimensional setup. And this is how one can create interest in composition. Please remember that in all these examples, we are not going in detail about the theme and meaning making. All right. So, however, we are just exploring the fundamental elements and trying to understand how these elements are helping out to create interesting composition. If you look at this example, this is another similar example where overlapping is very prominent. Specifically, if you look at hand and then leg part, so because of this overlapping, it feels like there is a depth and there is a volume within the whole. There is a space which is getting created. This is another example about goddess Isis. So here as well, if you notice the overlapping hands, immediately it gives you an illusion of depth and space. I would suggest you look into this kind of example more and then try to understand and then try to argue whether you are also able to see the space and depth within the painting or design composition or no. In our Indian crafts such as Madhubani painting, charial scrolls, kalamkari, etc., on the screen this is a Madhubani painting which is visible. So in all these crafts, overlapping techniques has been used in prominence because most of the time the technique is very flat. So they use flat shapes and flat colors to create the composition. So in this case, the overlapping is helping out in terms of creating the depth and volume on a flat two-dimensional surface. Right? Can you also notice if you look into other Madhubani painting, these are the basically stories from contemporary world as well as at the same time from the traditional, our mythology like Ramayana and Mahabharata, where a lot of stories has been shown. And then there are, for example, if the character is playing in the courtyard, you will find there is a lot of overlapping with the faces, with the characters, with the trees and branches. Why it is happening? Just to create an illusion of depth and then to give you a sense that these things are happening in a space and in a physical setup. So I hope by now you will be little clear about the role and power of overlapping technique in visual design composition. Now let us see another interesting technique known as shading to create the same illusion of 2D surface, right? To create same illusion of 3D on a 2D surface. So shading plays a crucial role in creating the illusion of 3D form in graphic design. By manipulating light and shadow, shading techniques gives depth and volume to flat and two-dimensional object. If you look at the screen, there is a pot with a plant where the shading has been used to create this three-dimensional aspect. So now from flat it is becoming three-dimensional. So if you go in detail of shading, shading replicates how light interacts with the surface. When light hit an object, it creates an area of highlighted or brightest part, you can say. Then you will find there is a midtones, which is gradual transition, and then shadow, which is the darkest part of the object. So this variation in light intensity across the object surface gives it a sense of dimensionality and realism. Another thing is the light areas typically appears closer. That means if something is bright, it is closer to your eye, closer to you, while the darkest area or the darker area recede into the background. So this, when you look at this kind of setup, it gives you a sense of perspective. And this contrast between light and shadow enhances the viewer's perceptions of depth and distance within the form. Now there are different techniques to achieve or create shading, and these are hatching, cross hatching, stippling, blending, and scribbling. But these are only few. There can be multiple other ways to create. More you will read, more you will understand through the literature as well. However, these are the main techniques, and this has been kind of experimented and then created, translated into another techniques. So if you look at hatching and cross hatching technique, it involves drawing closely spaced parallel or intersecting lines to create shadows and define form. It is used to create shading, texture, and depth by placing a series of parallel lines close to one another. This technique is especially useful for adding tone and contrast to the illustrations. And that way it gives the illusion of shadow and form without using gradient or color. Whereas if you look at stippling is done using small dots to create varying degree of shading, often used for a texture appearance. Another thing is stippling relies on small individual dots placed closely together or spaced apart. The density of the dots determine the tone or shading. If they are closer, they appear darker. If they are spaced away, then they appear lighter. So the area with more dots will be darker, while the area with fewer dots are lighter. Now there is another technique called blending. It is a technique where tones are softly merged to create smooth changes in the light, and it mimics the realistic light fall off on the rounded forms. Whereas in scribbling, we just scribble lines to create similar effect. It is a random creation of lines, maybe in rounded form, in a straight line, diagonal line, whatever. You just scribble and then try to create the density. So once the lines are dense, it creates a darker effect. When the lines are open and then less dense, then it is a lighter part, and accordingly you create a kind of sense of depth and illusion of volume as well. So just to understand this in a better way, these are some examples from BDS classroom assignments where students have sketched still life. So what we do in the classroom setup, we place some object on a center table, and then we ask a student to sketch it from whatever places they are sitting. So they will have a multiple perspective and view, and accordingly they will sketch it. And this is a very good exercise in terms of understanding the light and shadow depth within the composition. If you look at these paintings, the texture has been blended very effectively, and accordingly, it is creating an illusion of 3D form on 2D surface. Now, this is purely done using hatching technique. So, as disclosed previously, hatching is a simple yet versatile technique in graphic design for creating shading, texture, and form using only lines. And by controlling the direction of the lines, density, and spacing of lines, designer can produce a wide range of tonal variation, depth. They can create realism, especially when you are working with black and white or monochromatic works. And also these techniques add a lot of richness and texture to design. This example, a very interesting example, also similar to cross hatching technique. However, here instead of pencil or pen, MDF board, nails, and black thread has been used to get the texture. This is an interesting exercise to polish your skills in terms of understanding again light and shade, also creating different tones and impression of depth and shadow. This is another example using same technique, and if you guys are interested, I would suggest you do this exercise with your own portrait. I'm sure you will enjoy doing this and love the final outcome. If needed, you may take reference using printouts of your portrait. And if you look at this whole exercise, it is just about understanding where there is a more light and where there is a less light, which area is more highlighted, which area is less highlighted. If you look at this portrait, so here this area it is less highlighted and then open, you can see a lot of light, but the hair part is very dark. And then if you look at neck, it is even lighter than the hair. So this way it is creating a sense of 3D illusion or the three-dimensionality in the artwork. This one is an excellent example of stippling done by one of BDS students to create an illusion of depth, volume, and texture. It has came out very realistic if you look at the image, right? If you just look at the texture and then fold, everything is so prominent, and even the edges, raw edges, and then the thread which is coming out, and it has been done with a lot of patience, and it has took a lot of time. Okay, so stippling requires careful attention and patience as the effect is built up dot by dot. It is, as said, a time consuming technique, but if done properly can produce highly detailed and textured image, especially in black and white artwork similar to the one which is visible on the screen. You can also create using stippling a very smooth transition between light and dark area, and by varying the concentration of dots, designer can create a gradual gradient of tone, and then that will help in a realistic depiction of shadow and light. That means using various techniques we can create stunning illustrations like this, but the question is how it would be helpful in graphic design works. So there are different ways to use it effectively. For example, in graphic design composition, a well-placed highlights and shadows can guide the viewer's eye towards a specific part of the form, emphasizing important features. So you can use this for creating emphasis. Also, by controlling the light source and then intensity of shading, designers can create a focal point with the form, Again, it is to do with emphasis, and that is how it works. Few things you must remember when using these techniques is you should use the full range of value from darkest dark to lightest light, okay, and all tones in between. So if you look at this, the stippling technique on the screen, so that this is the darkest part and this is the lightest. If and the designer or the creator has created all the tones in between as well, just to give you an illusion of roundness, right? This is another thing which is so the value in a picture are relative, and the darkest darks can act as a guide to create a range of tones required. So if you look at this image, so this is the darkest one. So if you are looking on an object and then using a stippling technique or any technique, shading technique, so you have to find out the darkest area or the lightest area first, and then try to see how it is changing or varying from darkest to light, and then what kind of tones you have to create. If you can visualize that, then it is very easy for you to replicate the same on your page or on your paper. The third thing is objects appear darker when they recede and lighter when they come forward towards the light source. This is another example from the same artwork. So if you look at the center area, which is lighter, so there is a roundness and it is upfront. And then if you look at the darker area, which is receding, you can also try this. When you look at any object in your surrounding, you will find the same appearance. So the takeaway, we can say that shading is what transforms basic geometric shapes into recognizable realistic forms. Without shading, a circle is just a flat shape, but when you are using shading, it can become a sphere with a clear sense of roundness and volume. This realism is crucial in product design, architecture, illustration, and other fields that requires a lifelike representation of object. So now many times three-dimensional illusions are created in a very illogical manner, which contradicts our conventional perception of form, and thus in most of the cases helps in creating powerful impact. And these things are called illogical use of form, or which is in actual it is not possible, but when you create this complex form, it creates a lot of impact, very powerful impact on the viewer or user. For example, the impossible cube or irrational cube is one of the several impossible objects. The impossible cube draws upon the ambiguity present in Necker's cube illustration, which is on towards your right. Ambiguous figure like the Necker's cube are those that, for the viewer, flip back and forth between equally possible perspectives of object represented. So sometimes you see something and then immediately once you look closely you see something else. So there is a flip between two, or there is a transition between two states. And this kind of impossible figures are a special case of ambiguous figure in which part of the picture that are not ambiguous are drawn in incompatible perspective. Means the perspective which is to our traditional understanding, it is not happening, and thus it creates confusion when someone is looking on it. Another example is if you look at Penrose Triangle where real construction is impossible. But if you look at the right side, this GIF image, it explains how it is possible, and it totally depends on from what side and what angle we are looking at it, isn't it? So that means how we look at object, what from what side we look at it, what angle we look at it, accordingly we perceive things. We'll disclose few more examples in future where a lot of graffiti art has been done in the space. So same letter has been created maybe in a space of 10-meter wide space or something, and then some of the parts are coming up front, some of the parts are going behind. So we'll see these examples and then we'll try to understand. Another example is this in this category is Blivet, also known as impossible fog. If you look at this image, what do you see? It is an optical illusion and an impossible object as well. So it appears to have three cylindrical prongs at one end, with which then mysteriously transform into two rectangular prongs at the other end. So often on first glance, the Blivet looks entirely possible, but upon closer inspection, if you look at closely, then you will realize that it is very difficult to decipher. So you have three fog here, but suddenly here there are two things which are coming out. So if you look at this artwork which is done by famous Dutch graphic artist MC Escher, it has similar illusion. So in this artwork, logically the overall structure and water flow is impossible. Specifically look at the pillars. Pillars means these pillars, and try to understand if this is the wall or this is the surface and this pillar is connected here, how come it can go here and then connect? So this illusion, for example, this is here and then suddenly it is taking part in this space which is little away, and then also this water which is coming from the top, and then it feel like it is coming from the two-story. So this in actual this is not possible, but when this kind of illusion is getting created, it creates lot of impact and interest as well. So I would suggest please look into MCS's work. He has done lot of this kind of work, and inspire yourself. All right, then here we are done with understanding form as a design element. And if I have to summarize, we started our discussion in terms of understanding form, then we looked into different techniques through which we can create illusion of a form on 2D surface. And under this, we talked about adding plane structure, overlapping, and shading. Shading is one of the most prominent and important technique. Also, if you remember, we also discussed about isometric grid, where the lines are going at 30-degree angle and crossing each other and giving a grid which can support to create a three-dimensional structure. And also we looked into its role in creating refined perspective in our drawing. We learned about different techniques of shading such as hatching, cross-hatching, stippling, blending, and scribbling. And finally we talked about illogical form. So I hope you can now explore this further, and remember, more practice will lead you to better understanding. So don't stop practicing. We will break here and meet again in our next video lecture on space as an element of design, and try to understand how it is useful in graphic design. Till then, goodbye and see you soon.